welcome to the Amp Lab, live from the Music Project. I'm Rick Moyer, enjoying the World Music Day today. I've been out and about looking at all the great stuff and smelling all the good food, but most importantly, I've been talking to some really cool people involved in music. And my guest right now happens to be Johann Peters. Hello, Johann.
Hey, what's up?
Good things,
Good to
man.
see you, Rick.
You look pretty good up there. Oh, wait a minute. I better push the button. There. You look pretty good up there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
that's
yeah.
good. I even
Clean
did
up.
the fun thing and put you on the lower thirds. There you go.
Oh, right.
I called you a filmmaker. Is that okay? Because you're more than a filmmaker.
Yeah, I'm
You do a lot more.
producer. I've produced records, played in bands,
Yeah.
musician myself.
I couldn't believe it.
but-
You played me a clip last night. All right, guys, this is hilarious, guys and gals. I hear this like AC/DC music playing, and he goes, "Yeah, that's me," and I'm like, "What?" And
Bells.
yeah, and you put it up on the screen, and there it was. It was him, and I'm like, "No way!" It was so awesome.
Yeah.
Good job, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of like in Arizona. I was in a band called Myrrh, and I was heavily influenced by somebody that I met in the studio named James Angel, and we recorded him in his career with this band called Nero's Rome.
Okay.
And so that led to me archiving all this, press releases, near misses with record deals. And so they were a cool band. They kind of were like a David Bowie in excess, and there was a lot of label interest.
Yeah.
He was like James, is still like a Michael Hutchence.
Right.
Or Jim Morrison. Or,
Right.
Chris Cornell. You'd think of him in the same terms of that. But the interesting thing about him is he was raised in a Christian bubble as homeschooled, the only graduating senior in his class. He was a valedictorian. He was the class president. He was the treasurer. He was everything. So his dad was Dennis was a state cop, and they interviewed for the film. And he became a Baptist preacher, and they started a homeschool environment. The only time that James heard top 40 music was the 1 year that he rode the public school bus before they started school. He was kind of a teenager, maybe 8th grade or something like that.
Right.
And so he was just completely...
He did.
It was almost like that was like a forgotten memory. Some of it would slip in now and then, but it was pretty much they were... Frisbee and the Beatles records into the city dump, go Satan, and
Right.
And then so he was very steeped in the Baptist tradition. He didn't listen to Led Zeppelin until he was 23 years old.
What?
Yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
just insanity. So he kind of broke out on his own and moved to Portland. Didn't have a car, so he kind of disconnected from that community. It'd be like a Mormon leaving or
Right,
a Jehovah's
right.
Witness
It just
leaving.
yeah, 'cause you leave
but
everything.
the family still everybody's
Everything
loved.
you know is gone.
He had just a rich musical family, and 3 sisters were really the stars of the show. Christina, Liz, and Kim were the superstars. They'd go to State Fair and do 3-part harmonies, and they were really the ones. But the boys were like three boys, Tony, Theo, and James. They would do barbershop quartets, and that was a big deal.
Right.
But what happened when James was like 14, he saw the film Amadeus.
Oh.
And then,
That'll change. Yeah.
And he was playing, the classical. He became fascinated with Mozart, so he started learning those movements.
Wow.
And it just turned out that he was an incredibly gifted pianist, so much so that he was going to go to a conservatory in Austria.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I mean, that movie absolutely changed his life. But the fortunate thing is he met a guy named Todd Morrissey, who was from Clatskanie, Oregon, and another guy named Stuart Fritchman, a bass player and a guitarist. So Stuart's a bass player, Todd's the guitarist, and then James was playing keyboard. And he was just going to be the keyboardist. He wasn't going to be the lead singer or anything
Right,
like that. He was
right.
singing, he had written songs, he'd put little pieces together. And then he basically just tore into it and started getting steep. They were introducing him to AC/DC for the first time,
Oh, boy.
like stuff
Yeah.
like that. But they weren't really playing AC/DC. They were doing more like a Bowie thing, like Duran Duran was a big deal in the band. So they decided, like, James, you look like a lead singer. You know, he looked like kind of like a Rat Rod dude when he was younger. You know, just a really good James Dean, short hair and everything. Just a really beautiful man. Stewart always said, you know, you look at a statue of the David and you look at James, and you go like, wow.
Hey, wow.
But then,
did he model
you know,
for that?
the shocking thing is that he has the talent to back up his looks and his voice. And he's got this deep, rich baritone, but he could also hit these really high kind of, I don't even know, like Jim Morrison or something like that. You know, those just heart-wrenching screams, you know, that he would come out. It was his own thing, but I mean, that's just a comparison, more or less.
Okay, so you're sharing all this because you have, we didn't say it at the beginning, but you are producing a documentary on
Nero's Rome.
Nero's Rome. And I have to say, I got to watch part of it, and you got me hooked, man.
Yeah.
You got me hooked. It's really well done, and the stories. Yeah, it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, I never.
It is the story of Nero of Rome.
It is.
James is Nero. You know, he really is. You know, he's had the highest of highs in the music business,
and pretty low.
And got, you know, there's been some times where he's had it in the dirt a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know, like David Bowie called him to his house and said, "Hey, I wish I would have written your record. I just love your record. I want to be." John Taylor from Duran Duran loved his solo work so much that he would fly up to Portland from Los Angeles and rehearse in a wet, damp basement, you know, and just moldy, like he probably hadn't been in conditions like that since he'd been in England.
Why did you want to do this story?
You know, he's just it's just such a fascinating study on you know, the band dynamics, you know, where you got Stewart and Todd writing, you know, when James wouldn't maybe show up for practice or something, they'd be sitting there with the acoustic guitar, and they would and then, you know, Stewart became really proficient on acoustic guitar, so he started doing rhythm progressions, and then he would then Todd would like start playing over, and he would just absolutely take off.
Wow.
Just ripping leads. So the band actually transitioned, pulled James off the keys, and got another keyboard player, a guy named Kevin Kozad, who was also an amazing singer. So he's a harmonist. You had two like
really
soprano in Todd almost. You
so
know,
they
like,
could do these amazing.
They could do amazing 2-3-part harmonies, and you know, just add a backup vocal, almost like I hate to like say it like that, but it was almost like a Van Halen style of backup, but their own thing. You know, I wouldn't say it sounded anything like Van Halen, but I would say like it was that level. It was just the contrast between the voices, and then Stewart was like kind of poetic, and he started James on that literature journey of helping James kind of form his own writing style. You know, where the Euro rock kind of started. It was like stuff about like Jimmy Swaggart was one of the songs. It's called Cat House Tango.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he wrote this thing, and the funny thing was his dad was a preacher, and his stylings when he would be in between the songs, he'd be like, you know, hey, I was at church watching Star Wars, you know, like or whatever, and I was in my sheet and I saw this guy come on TV, and it was almost like he was like doing his own preaching,
but in a different way,
in the rap between songs, and it was really fascinating to listen to. And he goes, and there's this guy named Jimmy Swaggart had a little trouble, you know. And this is like Cat House Tango, you know, where he got caught.
When is your film coming out? Because I think people need to see it.
You know, I'm shooting for November. I still have some editing to do. The storyline's fairly well established. I'm moving some other parts around. But, you know, there's, you know, a lot of bands that came out of this. So you got, like, they had the Spinal Tap missing drummer. You had, well, it started out with a drummer that was, Mark Wills, who basically the first night kicked the beater, first live gig out, kicked the beater through the kick drum. And the show was pretty much ended after the first song. And then another time he, like, broke the snare stand. The roadie Sam or Skip was like holding up the drum, you know, the snare drum, so he could hit it, and it was like total disrepair. So the guy just didn't care about his drums. He was a really good, like kind of Rush style drummer or whatever.
Right.
But it wasn't the right style for them. So they had Island Records was coming up. They were like, "This is the next NXS. This is the next deal. This is the next big deal." And they were green at that point, but they could already hear it because they were selling thousands of cassettes all over Portland.
Wow.
With this record called Labor. While they were making Labor, they had this guy named Tony Lash. Now, people that really know music know Tony Lash is an amazing drummer and producer. And he was very into the Trevor Horn work, like Owner of a Lonely Heart, Seal, Kiss from a Rose, that, the real separation. And so their first record was very like separate. You could hear like every aspect. It wasn't like that fuzzy, distorted, after Guns N' Roses where it got really gnarly and then moved into grunge.
Right.
So they were still like writing that thing. And so they did like a lost record, a full lost record in between Labor and this self-titled grunge record that they just happened. They were like one of that it literally came out within a couple months of Nirvana.
Wow.
It was like a folk grunge record, but it was heavy. It was super heavy, super deep lyrics. The lyrics just went to a different place.
Right.
And it kind of left all the girls that would go to this show, it was like a Bon Jovi concert or something.
Right.
But really like smart, classy, modelly Portland girls.
Right.
Not like, not like bimbos. Like these girls were like they were into literature.
Right. It's like, whoa.
And and James's wife was,
the best kind of girls.
Yeah. His wife had a master's in literature, and Aaron also, his wife, who he had his daughter Astrid with, was just amazing.
That's cool.
And it was great. And that transition between Stewart starting to talk about the literature world and being poetic himself, and then adding in James and Aaron all together, it was this triangle. And James just pretty much took off on his own. Like, she just kind of gave him books, like read Nietzsche, read this,
and he
read
did.
that. Yeah.
And he did.
And then, and then just added that touch or that flavor, or he'd find a word he liked, and then he'd like put it in the song, build a song around the word, this weird word that you wouldn't think of. But Nero's Rome was just the most amazing Northwest band that could have been like the Stone Temple Pilots or the Bush or whatever, but they were so much closer to the Seattle scene. They were playing in the Seattle market.
Wow. All right, so I would talk to you all day about this, but I have a couple of other questions for you.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so you are involved. You're on the board of directors for the Music Project.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I met you last year at World Music Day, and then we've interacted a few times since then. But tell me a little bit about what you think about the Music Project.
Oh, man, the Music Project is great. Aberdeen, I come from a town, it's almost like, it could almost be a carbon copy. It's Longview, Washington, where Charles Peterson grew up also. And, it's a logging town. There's a lot of fishing, hunting, stuff like that. And, a mill industry. We had Reynolds Metals down there and stuff.
Right.
And, the town was, just kind of lacked creativity, but there was some interesting points in Longview. That was one of them, was when Green Day wrote their record. It was like "Welcome to the Longview,"
right?
Or
right,
whatever.
Right.
So that they've never like grabbed onto that title. Like, yeah, we were this is where he was when he wrote that song, and he named the song after us. Billy did, and the band and the rest of Green Day. So depressed town culturally, we were closer to Portland, so but just people just never really got out of Longview. It was just kind of like you didn't get out of town. If you did, you went to the Molly Hatchet
and
concert.
Here we are at Aberdeen.
Yeah, and that's even a little further out.
Yeah.
So anyway, Longview and Aberdeen are so close, but what they share in common is the artistic community is out there. All these kids have such access to art, to the podcast world, which is the new broadcast journalism.
Yeah.
And, I think what's going to happen, at least with you, Rick, and that's what I love about what you and your fine lady over here are doing and facilitating in this place, is like teaching those kids broadcast. You're teaching them basically old school broadcast skills, but teaching
with the
them
new tools.
yeah, with the new tools, but then also the human touch of the art of the interview. Are you going to be Howard Stern? Are you going to be more like Billy Corgan's doing some great work?
Because there's
soft white underbelly.
Get your style, yeah.
Yeah, find your style. Or are you going
But
to be
there's
like
basics,
influencers?
and there's basics to all of that, and that's what we want to do is mentor kids and get them to do the basics. So it's not just going on YouTube and going, I'm gonna play my game. There's take that passion that you have and get it out there.
Yeah.
But you have to have tools to do that.
Yeah, whether you're gonna be a grunge, talk about grunge music, or you're gonna talk about like 80s new wave music or 70s hard rock or whatever. It's just great that we can, that we can spotlight whatever talent or wherever the kids want to go to.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what the cool part about the music project here is. It's youth orientated. It targets people that want to be inspired and do something big. Yeah.
Podcasts, screen printing, making show posters, art, recording studio, making films, editing films, working with the bands, doing unplugged sessions here in the studio. And, then there's going to be like a future, hopefully independent film festival along with music,
cool.
where hopefully we're going to get the static reel cinema open.
That's gonna be so cool. Okay, we could talk forever, Johann.
Oh, of course we could. Yeah.
Are there ways people can get a hold of you if they want to know more about you? How do they find you?
They can hit me up on the real Johann Peters on Instagram.
The real.
Yeah, or you can hit up Johann Peters, on Facebook. I still use that legacy media.
All right.
And then just look around. You'll find me on the internet someplace.
Thanks for stopping in.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Oh, thanks.
All right.
Love
it
you,
is
man.
live from the Amp Lab here at the Music Project. We're having a great time. Up next, we have a really cool surprise interview. I think you're going to like it. Thanks.